Hey everyone, someone asked me a series of great questions this morning, and I'm going to go ahead and take a shot at answering them right now. The first was if Bitcoin was $800,000 per coin, would I consider that overvalued, undervalued, about right, etc.? The answer is I would say 800,000 would be undervalued. And the reason for that is that the price of gold, literally the yellow metal, the price of gold is just to reach parity with the price of gold. Bitcoin would need to be somewhere around $950,000. Let's round up. Let's call it a million. So somewhere around $1 million per coin, Bitcoin, the total value of all the Bitcoin in the world, will surpass the total value of all the gold in the world. Now, the vast majority of gold's value is for its monetary properties. There is some small portion of the $18 trillion value of gold. There is some small portion of that that is the industrial uses and the decorative uses for things like jewelry. But a huge percentage of that $18 trillion is due to its monetary properties. It's the fact that central banks have been hoarding gold forever as a way of backing their own currencies. So Bitcoin, which is right now at $76,000 per coin, at $76,000 per coin, Bitcoin, the total value of all the Bitcoin in the world right now is 1.5 trillion. So to go from 1.5 trillion to 18 trillion, Bitcoin would need to increase by a factor of 12x. That is 1,200%. So it would require Bitcoin to increase by 12x even to just get to the price of gold. And Bitcoin is superior to gold in every way with regard to monetary properties. It's more portable, it's more divisible, it's more scarce, it's more verifiable, everything. Like everything that people want gold for, other than industrial and decorative uses, which again is a small part of gold's $18 trillion total value. Um, Bitcoin is superior in all of those ways. So one measure to say is Bitcoin over or undervalued is to compare it to gold, and by that factor, I would say it's 12x undervalued. Once it reaches parity with the price of gold, then you can start having a discussion about how much more valuable is Bitcoin than gold, and to what degree is what portion of gold's market capitalization, which is called market cap, what portion, which is the measure of the total value of all the gold in the world. A company's market cap is the value of all the shares of the company. For a commodity, it's the value of all of the sort of all of the reserves or all of the gold that's ever been dug out of the ground in human history. That total value is about 18 trillion. So I think we start by getting Bitcoin from where it is now at 1.5 trillion dollars total value to 18 trillion dollars. So that's 12x. But the question is, how much higher can it go? So the reason people are not holding gold is because 2% more gold gets dug out of the ground every year. So gold is inflationary, unlike Bitcoin, where there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin that ever exist. Gold is technically unlimited. It's just a matter of how fast you can dig it out of the ground. So that is one reason people choose not to hold it, because there's 2% more gold every year dug out of the ground, which means every 36 years, the total amount of gold in the world doubles. So 36 years, 36 years, 36 years, the total amount of gold that's in circulation above ground in the United States doubles, and then it doubles, and then it doubles every 36 years, over and over and over every 36 years. So that makes it a lot less scarce than Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is much more scarce. And again, there's just a lot of downsides to gold. It's hard to verify. You can't use it as a transaction medium. Uh, it's hard for an individual to store it safely and securely, or to verify that what they own is gold and not fake, or tungsten that has a gold finish on it or something like that. So I think Bitcoin is very far superior. So another way to value gold, if you look at page 65, so page 65 of the 2023 Big Ideas report from ARK Invest, and there's a screenshot of this single page on my Bitcoin Bubble Myth website. So Bitcoin Bubble Myth, the word Bitcoin, the word bubble, and then the word myth, myth.com. So bitcoinbubblemyth.com. If you go there, the second half of the presentation that you can watch on that website is me talking about how to value gold. It's the second part of my presentation. So it's like, starts at, I don't know, whatever it is, the second, just watch the whole thing. You'll see it. You'll see me talk about the value of Bitcoin and how to value it. and I go through Metcalfe's law, and I have a screenshot in there somewhere in that presentation about the value of Bitcoin. And ARK Invest says, they're sort of most bearish, meaning pessimistic view is that it's going to be worth 258,000 by 2030. Their sort of medium estimation is 600 some thousand. And then their sort of bullish optimistic forecast is 1.4 million per Bitcoin. Michael Saylor is in a different way. He looks at it and says there's $900 trillion of assets in the world. 900 trillion. That's all assets. That's stocks, bonds, real estate, gold, everything. Everything that a human owns that has value is worth 900 trillion. Of that, about half is financial assets. So that's 450 trillion. So of that 450 trillion, gold is 18 trillion. So about 4% of that. So about 4% of the 450 trillion in financial assets is gold. So again, Michael Saylor believes that Bitcoin is ultimately going to get to about 7% of all assets, of all 9 trillion in assets, and that would result in Bitcoin having a price per coin of about 13 million per coin. So Michael Saylor thinks Bitcoin is going to about $13 million per coin, and that it will ultimately land at about 7% of the total assets that people own for any reason. I think I'd have to do the math, but I think $13 million per coin, I think that ends up being 7% of the total value of all the Bitcoin in the world ends up being 7% of 900 trillion. I don't think that's 7% of 450 trillion. I think it's 7% of 900 trillion, but I don't know. Regardless, Michael Saylor has a whole presentation, and I think I think he calls it Model 21 or something like that. He's got a financial model online that you can download and play with, where you can model out what you think the value of Bitcoin is going to be based on a lot of different assumptions. Give me one second. Okay, so is the value of Bitcoin potentially infinite? No. In any economy, the percentage of total wealth or assets that humans want to hold in the form of money is some number that is not infinite. First of all, the value cannot exceed all the goods and services in the world that could be bought with that asset because, the value of an asset is to some degree correlated to its purchasing power. So you can't have an asset that's more valuable than all the things in the world that could ever be purchased with the asset. That's just the nature of money. And money represents purchasing power. And if you can't buy, the purchasing power of money cannot exceed all of the things that could possibly be bought with that money. Okay. So, in addition to that, there are some things that people are going to want to hold other than money, right? They're going to want to hold, they might want to own a house. They might want to own a car. They might want to own a boat. People are just going to buy stuff that they own that they want to own that is not money. So not only can the total value of Bitcoin not exceed the total value of all the goods and services that could ever be purchased with it in the world, it's also going to be something less than that based on the fact that people are going to want to own things other than Bitcoin. Now I'm super oversimplifying this. So if some economist is watching this, I do understand I'm oversimplifying this, and they're going to say, well, that's not technically correct because not everybody's going to buy stuff at the exact same moment in time. And so technically the value of the money, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm making this as simple as I can. So please understand that. Right. So a better way to look at it is just to say, humans are going to want a certain percent of all the assets they own to be in the form of money, as opposed to stocks or bonds or something that has more risk. And when Bitcoin is fully monetized, meaning everybody in the world is using it as their primary money, then it will appreciate in value at about 2% to 3% per year. And that is because human productivity increases by 2% to 3% per year. So if the amount of money in the world is finite at 21 million Bitcoin, and the total goods and services you can buy with the stuff is going up by 2 or 3% per year, then the value of the money is going up by 2% or 3% per year, because as humans get better at making stuff, you'll be able to buy more stuff with the same money. And the reason you can't do that now is because the government prints about 7% more money every year. So of that 7% more money that the government prints every year, a couple percentage points is absorbed by other countries who are adopting the US dollar because their local currency is even worse. and then multiple percentage of that, most of the rest of that is absorbed by inflation, which means other than a few things like computers and technological stuff that tends to decrease in value. The price of a personal computer went from $2,000 when I was a kid to $200 now. It's like 90% drop in price for a computer that sits on your desk at home. Other than that, everything else is going up in price because the government is printing more money, and not all of that money printing is being absorbed by other countries. Most of it shows up in the form of inflation here in the United States. Um, so it can't go up forever. The price of Bitcoin at some point in the next 10 to 50 years, it'll take at least another 10 years to be fully monetized. Could take longer than 50 years, or up to, I would say, 50 years to be fully monetized as the money that the entire world uses. But I think it's a multi-decade process, but I don't see that it would take longer than 50 years, and I don't think it'll take less than 10 years. When it's fully monetized, it will not be an investment asset because your upside will be limited to 2% or 3% per year, as opposed to now where your upside is radically higher than that. But that comes with volatility. You have to put up with, the volatility of Bitcoin to get that upside, and that volatility will go down over time, but so will the economic upside of holding Bitcoin until the volatility basically goes to zero and the economic upside goes to 2 or 3%. So anyway, it's not infinite, but it's way higher. So if you want to look at ARK Invest, you're looking at a price per Bitcoin. The middle of their model says, 600 and some $1,000 per Bitcoin. So call it roughly 10x its current price. If you look at the price of gold, you're looking at 12x its current price. If you're looking at Michael Saylor's model, you're looking at, radically higher multiples based on what he thinks is going to happen. The number I like is $1 million per coin because it's right around the price at which Bitcoin and gold reach price parity. And at that point, you can say, well, look, Bitcoin's more valuable than gold. Yes. But also, gold has a few properties like its industrial and decorative uses that Bitcoin doesn't have. So, uh, I typically use $1 million as sort of the terminal velocity of Bitcoin. But if somebody said you have to pick, is it going to be worth less or more than a million? I would say, well, definitely more. It's just when you get above $1 million per coin, now you're having to justify why Bitcoin's going to be doing things that gold has never been able to do in 5,000 years. Now, I do think Bitcoin is radically better than gold, so it should be significantly more valuable than gold. But how much more valuable, that becomes speculation because we don't live in a world where we know with certainty historically how much value of the total assets in the world people have wanted to store in money because the money's always been inflating. And with the money always inflating, people are constantly trying to get out of the money and into other things. They're trying to exchange, fiat currencies, meaning made up government currencies. They're trying to exchange them for real estate or for gold or for stocks or for bonds. And even for gold, again, you have this 2% per year inflation problem that they keep digging more gold out of the ground. And at some point, they could find huge gold, reserves that increase that number. Um, or they could mine on asteroids or whatever it is, and there's tons of gold in other places we have not been able to get, such as trace amounts in the ocean. There's massive amounts of gold in the ocean. We just haven't figured out how to condense it, how to get the gold out of the water. It's in ocean water, it's just in trace amounts. But if you could find a way to do that, like desalination, where you take the junk out of the water, if you could find a way to get the gold out of the water, gold's price would plummet quickly because it would be demonetized. So when you add up all of those elements, I think the probability, if somebody said $1 million per coin of gold or per Bitcoin, what's the probability that 25 to 50 years from now it's going to be higher or lower? I would say there's an 85% chance it's going to be above a million and a 15% chance it's going to be below a million. So obviously I strongly think Bitcoin's going to be worth more than $1 million per coin. Just hard to tell how much. Okay, so second question again, is it going to infinity? No, it's not going to infinity because money has a terminal velocity. If you drop 1,000 people on an island with nothing, they will find something to use as money, seashells or, precious metals they dig out of the ground. They will find something to use as money. And that thing that they find to use as money will end up being some percentage of the total wealth on the island, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be infinite. It's going to be something, the number that, comes to mind as far as what percent of all assets would humans want to own in the form of money as opposed to stocks, bonds, real estate, et cetera. I don't know, 10%, 25%, less than 50%. I just don't know. Uh, Michael Saylor's probably got a better. Well, let's put it this way. I think Michael Saylor, it's probably not worth more than 7% of all the assets in the entire world. So if somebody said, give me an upper limit, give me a number where you don't think Bitcoin's going to be worth more than, I think Michael Saylor's number was like, 13 million a coin. Although I think he had like sort of a much higher forecast at like 41 or $43 million per coin or something like that. But let's take the number that sticks in my head, which most people who follow Michael Saylor, if you said, how much does he think Bitcoin could be worth? They'd be like, I think he said like 13 million a coin or something like that. So if somebody said, give me an upper limit for what Bitcoin's worth in US dollar terms today, let's call it 13 million, although I'm a lot more comfortable with the number like $1 million per coin. Okay. So next up, technical analysis. Is it valuable to use technical analysis to decide if you should invest in Bitcoin now versus wait? I don't think so. The only thing technical analysis does is trick people into not buying Bitcoin and making them wait. The only thing that's been consistent with Bitcoin over time is that it tends to have 3 up years and 1 down year. So 2011, 12, and 13 are up years. 14 is a down year. 15, 16, 17 are up years. 18 is a down year. 19, 20, 21 are up years. 2022 is a down year. 23, 24, 25 should be up years. 26 is probably a down year. So that's been the only thing that's been consistent over time. And as I've said, numerous times, I think the probability that the lowest price Bitcoin gets in 2026, I think there's a very high probability that the lowest price that Bitcoin gets in 2026 is higher than the price today. So if even someone said, well, Joel, I'm going to take your word for it. I'm going to wait for 2026 to buy the dip. I don't know the lowest price Bitcoin will get in 2026, but it might be $140,000. It might peak out at $280,000 in 2025 and then drop to $140,000 in 2026. And how are you going to know when the dip is? You don't know. There's no way in 2026 to know what the low price is. What if you decide you're going all in on the lowest dip in 2026 and you decide that the lowest dip in 2026 is 140,000? And the lowest it ever dips is 150,000, and then it leaves you behind and goes to 1 million. And you're sitting on US dollars losing 4% to 9% of their value every year while you just watch the train leave the station without you. There's no way to win that. I was investing in Bitcoin all the way down in 2022 and 2023. The lowest the price ever got in 2022 was 15,500. Everybody was all over Twitter with their technical analysis predicting 13,800. They had modeled it all out. They were absolutely certain based on all of their models and all of their charts and graphs and MBRV Z scores and all of that. Everybody was positive that the price would bottom at 13,800 and that anybody who did not wait for 13,800 was an idiot. Well, I was one of the idiots who thought they were idiots and that I was not going to try to time 13,800. So if you go look, there's still a ton of buy orders still sitting there at 13,800 waiting. Well, all of those people would have made what, 5 times, 6 times their money? They would have had a 600% return if they had just done what I was doing, which is I was buying all the way down. And the lower it got, the more I was buying. And I was buying. I didn't know where the bottom. I think, sorry, I have unstable internet here. I think the lowest price I ever bought was, 15,700 something. And I was just buying, buying, buying. And it started going back up and I kept buying on the way